Okay, another quick note here for the yang style. We're kind of haven't gotten into a lot of the postures or putting them together as yet. As yet, I've been a little lax. Life's been a little weird. But there's something to kind of note that I think will help in terms of keeping the correct posture. And we're kind of focus on the arms here. Normally we want to focus on kind of everything as one unit, but in these early stages, you got to kind of deconstruct everything to reconstruct it and put it back together. And as I said, I kind of want to, or as I teach this, I can't remember if I said this in the video, but I kind of think of it as if you have a really good cartoon is drawn, drawn in a series of pictures. And in order to make it a smooth, realistic form of movement, then there's sort of a lot of pictures in that 24 frames a second. So as we count out these early things, there's sort of a lot of things that kind of get in there and then kind of take away some of the counts of it, and then it starts getting more fluid as you go. And having some details early on does help. It might seem overwhelming at first, but the more you sort of hear something, the more you sort of get used to something early, it's sort of percolating in the subconscious a little bit. So then eventually it might be next week, it might be 5-7 years down the road or something like that. It'll figure out. Your subconscious is processing it. You get to the point where your body kind of feels a certain way after consistent practice. And things like that. So then it just becomes more of a, oh, that was that thing. And it kind of integrates in more. And another thing that I've said too, like one of my points of being a teacher is the same idea that should be, I think, for any teacher, regardless of subject, as well as any parent, is that you want to make the next generation better than you. That should be the point, is constantly progressing. So that maybe 200-300 years down the line, there might be someone who is super able to teach internals in a way where naturally it would take 10 years, but maybe they figure something out or do have some sort of cool Reiki sort of thing or something, and it's like 3 years gets you what would be 10. I don't know what's coming down the line, but it's just sort of an example of how to make it where we make it better for everyone else. And I don't want people to make the same mistakes I did, because everyone's going to have their own mistakes that they're going to make anyway. And then everyone's kind of got their own, physical differences and epigenetic differences and all these other things that create, different timelines for different things. So what I want to do is I want to talk about the way the arm is held. Now with Tai Chi, especially with Yang style, there's not really any of this where you get that straight arm. I'm not even locking out my elbow, which you definitely don't want, because then you're basically putting an arm bar on yourself. And as soon as you lock it, you're automatically like separating everything below that as a different thing. Even if the shoulder and everything else is completely integrated, you have 1 and 2 instead of 1. Not only that, you're now going to be facing just the strength of whatever part of the arm you're locking out, as opposed to being able to have the power of the whole body integrated from the heels that are rooting on up and out or in or anything. And you'll see a certain posture of the arm a lot. And that is this, we're just going to have this nice little curve. That's it. So it's almost like the arm from the shoulder down throughout into the fingers. Think of it, the image in my head is like a crescent moon. It's just that nice sort of curve, and it doesn't really, you have that nice sort of flow to it. So we don't want to curl up too much. We don't want to be too straight. There's like a Goldilocks zone of curve from the shoulder through the fingers. And that curve, again, with that fist space between the arm and the body, with that distance, that curve right here is going to serve you in a lot of places, tons of places. For example, when we get into, I'll start throwing out names now. We haven't gotten to them yet, but I'll start throwing out names. Grass sparrow's tail is going to be a big thing for me. It's in like 4 parts in Yang style, and it's a sort of 4. It's illustrative, or elucidates, shall we say, the 4 sort of cardinal directions, or cardinal energies out of the 8 energies. It's almost like a mini, tiny form within the larger form, and it's almost sort of like a solo Tui show, a push hands sort of routine with it too. It only shows up in the one side in the long form, but you can play it both and everything else like that. And the concepts of it get applied everywhere, especially when you get like Peng and Liu, ward off and roll back respectively. So this curve, now with grass sparrow's tail, it's going to start here and come out. Now this looks like you're doing a whole weird thing with the arm. You're not. All that's really going on is I have my hand here at my dantian. I've got that crescent moon curve with that fist distance between the body that we talked about. And all I'm doing is almost like it's pung. So you have that inflation, keeping the center line safe, is lifting it up. And just as we talked about with the opening thing, again, like there's a string around the wrist and there's someone pulling that string from the top. So there's nothing crazy going on with the arm, as you can see. I have that curve right in front of the body, and that string lifts it straight up to the wrist to shoulder height. Notice the elbow. This curve naturally helps keep that elbow below the wrist, and you want this angle. You know, that elbow starts raising up too much, then the shoulder starts triggering. Now there's a way that we do this in order to kind of set it more correctly, but you're still not, even when we get to, we'll see in the third part of grass bird's tail, the arm, instead of kind of here, comes more this way, but it's still not lifting that elbow, and that shoulder naturally gets triggered with that elbow raising. So when we have, I was talking to a couple of my guys about this today, when we go into a posture called part wild horse's mane, same thing. There's the curve. All I'm doing is it carries up center and rotates the forearm. Rotate the forearm is something you're going to hear a lot. Excuse me, that was professional. And then it can rotate over and part wild horse's mane. When we get into single whip, there's the curve. It points. So the arm is lifting again, almost like being carried from that string above. Here's the curve again. I'm just rotating that forearm. I rotate the forearm for the palm out and to push. So start thinking about this curve of the arm and that fist distance between the body and the arm. It's going to show up immediately in the long form. We're not going to get to the long form at first because we have the 13, the 16, the 49, and we're going to do the broadsword or saber routine first, eventually, between all that. But the 49 is going to have it actually there too. So and real quick, the opening comes in here. You know, we toe out, and as we step, there's the curve. Whoop, here and out. And all it's doing is as I come in, as soon as I make that curve in this arm and come up, the other hand curves. The wrist rotates, and it comes straight up. It's just the orientation of the body is a little different. So that curve of the arm, start kind of, and it's going to be the same thing as if we're doing the standing. Most of the standing postures here, same thing even here. Or as we come up, a little bit different as we drop down, but still having that curve, and as we carry up as well. Not really in those two with that, but in pretty much everything else. It's going to show up in Bagua. It'll show up in Xingyi, especially in the Santi, which is, you know, arguably, if only thing you ever get out of Xingyi is having a really, really good, powerful, solid Santi. Not solid as in solid, but solid as in, man, that Santi is good. You got all the Qigong going on. It's really meditative for you. That's really good. but it's going to show up in all of all the three main internals, the Taiji Chuan, the Xingyi Chuan, the Baguazhang. It even shows up when we're doing like moving Qigong stuff. It can also help you if you're doing like, you know, the mudras for doing your sitting meditation and everything else like that. You can find it kind of everywhere. And it helps because as we're here, keeping this curve and in one unit connected, so the shoulders relax, so the whole body's connected down through the spine and down through the heel, it can help you neutralize. Now, you don't push force against force, but there's ways to neutralize that, which still has a yield and redirect quality to it. So that's the Lu energy, which is sort of the poster child energy. Pung or ward off being the keystone, Le, which is roll back, which is yield and redirect, sort of the poster child energy. And that's still the same energy as sort of neutralizing. It's coming in and you're redirecting it. Just instead of, something like that or anything, it's more internal. But even that, when we come from Pung, there's the curve. Again, we're just rotating the forearm to roll back. So that sliver moon, where am I? That sliver moon curve is going to be something to notice and something to start feeling as we start moving into more of the postures as time goes on. Just something to kind of program into things right now. All right, hope that helps.